Great, we're going to keep going, and in this next fireside chat, it's going to be focusing on cyber in contested environments. Your moderator will be Alex Glad, CTO of Praxis Engineering, and he's going to be joined by Daniel Richard, Associate Deputy Director for Digital Innovation at the CIA. Let's give them a warm welcome.
All right. Thanks, everybody, again for being here. Thank you, Dan, for joining me here this morning. I think we have a lot of interesting things to talk about in this, but maybe we can start by just helping give a little definition to what are we talking about in terms of contested environments, cyber and contested environments. And I think a good way to do that is talking about the threat landscape. So, over the past few years, how have you seen the cyber threat landscape evolve, particularly in terms of things like adversary sophistication, adversary scale, targeting, and also blending with other domains such as influence operations?
Great. Thanks, Alex. Thanks also, Billy and group for hosting this and allowing us to sort of participate. CIA is usually not sort of in the forefront of sort of public discussion here, but I think this topic of sort of cyber defense, active cyber defense, I think is critical for the agency to be part of the conversation. So we appreciate our involvement in it. I think we've seen a transformational sort of change in the environment, right? 5-10 years ago, you were really looking at near-peer adversaries as sort of a focus of threat vector to you, ranging possibly to the teenager in the basement who was sort of fiddling around and possibly scanning your networks type of thing. I think what we're seeing now is not just through sort of ransomware sort of threats, but with the advent of technology, you really can see opportunities for other state actors and non-state actors to become quite effective in this space. So I do think one of the fundamental sort of trends that we have seen is the broadening of the threat actors that we have to defend against. I would also say that we've seen this especially in the ransomware space is there's a specialization that is going on out there of entities that are specializing in sort of one aspect of the either identifying vulnerabilities, building sort of tools, and they are making these things available to folks who are out there. So this allows actors that we previously wouldn't really have considered sort of a major cyber threat to rapidly advance their capabilities. So these are the things that we are keeping an eye on, in addition to what we've been talking about all morning in terms of state actors or threats like that.
Yeah, and I can add a little bit. In a previous role working for a cybersecurity company, we noticed a lot of a shift to like living off the land techniques, especially as we're talking more about mobility, which is great for things like productivity, but increases your threat aperture for things like that, where I don't necessarily have to exploit somebody's mobile device. I just ask very nicely to give me permission to access your contacts, for instance, right? And similarly, things like the advent of LLMs enabling people to shift their tactics in phishing, for example, where we used to educate people on things like look for bad grammar, misspellings in phishing emails. That doesn't happen anymore, right? So given all these things we've talked about, what do you think concerns you most about the trends and sort of the velocity that we're seeing in the threat environment?
So I think this was touched on in the first panel where the threat that concerns me is adversaries that are able to put together a whole variety of actions that I think can not just be sort of breaking a window, breaking in and stealing your data and leaving, but really causing a much more significant and strategic impact. So I think that is why we have focused on what we sort of call an active cyber defense posture. I think all of us are in agreement that compliance is sort of not the way to approach this. You have to approach it in a multi-layered sort of approach. So we, both at the tactical level within our organization, but within the whole US government at a strategic level, I think that is the path we need to take in an active cyber defense posture to really not just protect our organization, protect the government, but really to protect the country. Everybody really needs to sort of lean in and participate.
Great, and that's a good lead into our next topic here, talking about active defense, proactive defense, and this is our opportunity to talk about AI here on stage. So
it only took us 6 minutes.
That's right. So, obviously, like we've heard, AI is viewed as a force multiplier. So where do you see the most promise for the use of AI in things like the active defense, proactive defense that you mentioned?
Yeah. So look, I'm in the threat world, hence the gray hair, right? So you see a lot that worries you, and you obviously have to respond to that. I'm actually quite bullish and optimistic in how AI can be leveraged in the cyber defense space. I really think there is a lot of opportunity as we gather more telemetry data, more metrics, to be able to leverage AI to identify anomalies much more quickly, to be able to react to those threats in a much more proactive way. But I think that is required because I think we are seeing the time between the release of a zero-day exploit to it actually being exploited, that window is shrinking significantly. So AI for us, I think, isn't something that's sort of a nice to have to dabble in, put your toe in the water. I think you have to go all in because the threat is rapidly sort of expanding in this space.
Yeah, that's great. And we've heard a lot up here about how AI can be a game changer, but I think we also have to figure out how to balance that against potentially the new risks that are posed to us by the use of AI. Maybe just a super quick show of hands. Who here has heard of this trend, vibe coding, out in the world? So cool, a lot of you. I think I echo maybe your feelings. It terrifies me a little bit, the concept of people vibing their way through SOC operations. That doesn't sound too great. So in your mind, what are the potential risks of this rapid adoption of AI in this space?
So several of the panels have touched on it. I think one of the big conversations we need is to talk about where those humans should be in the process. I think as our adversaries get quicker, the pressure is going to be to automate more because you're going to need to rapidly respond to those threats. I think most of us would agree that having a human in the loop of that process is critical. I'm definitely in that camp. But that human can't just be a rubber stamp for an activity. It can't just be, I've seen all of the indicators, I'm going to push the button and move it along. That human has to know what they're accountable for. They have to understand what the AI indicators are showing them, and they have to also then make an informed judgment in response. I would also want to echo the training for incidents, because I think that is extremely critical for an organization. You are going to get hit. You are going to be sort of a target from these adversaries. So I think it is prudent for you to have an incident response team, an incident response plan, who the incident commander is, and to have that muscle memory on how you're going to react to that and how you're going to act in a degraded environment if that were to be the case. So to me, those are the things that I think we really need to have more of a conversation about. I think we all recognize the threat. I think we all recognize the impact that AI will have, but I think these are the discussions that we need to have in terms of implementation and responding to that.
Yeah, I think there's another angle here too of there's almost maybe an adversarial situation right now where we see a lot of people with fear of, I'm getting replaced by AI, but like we've heard in earlier panels, people are core to what we do, and so we have to build this foundation of trust in that, AI is a partnership here. We're not necessarily looking to replace you, we're looking to, make you more efficient in your day-to-day. So we heard some talk about compliance earlier. We're going to dive into this a little bit here as well. I also can reflect on previous experience, commiserating with sales teams who are bemoaning, talking to potential customers who are interested in checkbox exercises. So Dan, true defense, we really need a defender mindset, right? We heard talk of outcomes before. The outcome here shouldn't be, I want to pass my next audit. The outcome should be, I want to be able to defend my organization. I want to be resilient against attack. So in your mind, how do we start shifting that mindset from compliance to true defense?
Yeah, so I think it's a couple things. Some of it is cultural, right? In your organizations, putting that sort of digital mindset into each officer, regardless of what role they play, I think is critical. Making sure they have the tools to recognize anomalies and threats in their own limited sort of workspace is important. I also think that this is really a team sport. Within your organization, you may have a team that is focused on cyber defense, but they can't do it alone, right? They have to work with the network folks. They have to work with, for us, we have the benefit of gathering a lot of this threat information and intelligence and being able to sift through that and see that in terms of how to rack and stack your threat levels. I do think the information that CISA provides is critical in that effort, and I commend them for those efforts in this space. I also think that we need to work more closely with our private sector partners, and the new National Cyber Director during his confirmation hearing, I believe, really emphasized this collaboration with the private sector, and we've talked about that in the past, but I think it's become very transactional, and we have to transform that into a much more collaborative space. A lot of the talent is in the private sector. I think a lot of the critical infrastructure is primarily in private sector hands that we're dependent on. So we really can't do it without these partners if we're going to be successful.
And maybe a little bit rapid fire here at the end. We heard talk of the KEV and CVEs. Given everything we've talked about so far, from trends in the threat landscape and shifting from compliance to defense, how well do you think our current cyber risk frameworks, our way of thinking about cyber risk, is aligned to today's realities and maybe even looking towards tomorrow?
So I think we have sort of the right way to look at sort of the threat. I do think there is a benefit that not each mission element or organization see themselves in isolation, but rather see it as sort of a team threat. So just because there may be a target on our networks, for example, they could and are likely also focusing on my sister agencies' networks as well. So having those relationships both across the government, but also those outside government, to be able to address these sort of in that more comprehensive fashion. I think that's the direction we need to go. I do think we have sort of the framework, we have a recognition of sort of the threat, and now we just got to go out and implement and do the hard work.
Yeah, and I think an important part of this is, you heard others up here talk about metrics and measuring, and I really want to foot stomp that a little bit. I think, Dan, you would agree that metrics tend to drive priorities, and we heard how the KEV was a good way to sort of take the sea of CVEs and apply some more ways to sort of measure against what is actually important in that. So maybe super quick, what shifts in terms of governance or metrics do you think will be most critical to getting cyber risk management beyond just compliance?
Yeah, so I think the threat levels are so varied. I think the extent that you can rack and stack and prioritize those risks in a very dynamic environment, I think is critical. If anything, we now, because we have digitized so much, we are inundated with data, and we have to figure out the best way to sift through it, not to have meetings to discuss it, but to really decide how you're going to respond to it. So I think being able to leverage this AI capabilities to lead to decisions is, I think, where we need to work towards.
Great. I think we've exhausted our time here. So Dan, thanks again for joining us here
Thank
today.
you, everybody.
And again, thanks everybody for coming.
Great. Thank you, everybody.